Coming up, join me for a one-on-one with Governor Bill Walker. What lessons has he learned after 4 years on the job? Is a second term in his future ahead? A chance to find out just what Bill Walker would do if voters give him that opportunity.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers. 2018, an important political crossroads for our state. And in the governor's race, we will basically see 3 roads come together on November 6th. Then only one will remain. On Frontiers, we're exploring one of those roads in this program, starting with Governor Bill Walker. Later, we'll talk with Mark Bakich, the Democratic candidate in that race, to give you a chance to see whether his path to Juneau is the one that you want to choose. And at this point, we regret Mike Dunleavy, the Republican contender, has declined our invitation to appear on Frontiers. Our hope is that this would be a different kind of forum that would give the candidates more time to get into the issues. Well, we do have Governor Bill Walker here. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's an honor.
We have a big rural audience, and I think that we can get into some issues that affect them. But first of all, I want to start off with just a basic question. What do you think are the top 3 things that you accomplished in office?
Well, the first was just get there. The process of getting there, being a unity ticket, was something that's never been done before. And working with Byron Malott, us combining, we discovered along the trail that we loved Alaska more than we loved politics. So we did the unthinkable. We combined our campaigns, and it's been pretty phenomenal administration as a result of that. The second is the providing health care coverage to 44,000 Alaskans, accepting Medicaid expansion. That has brought down our budget, healthcare budget, by about $16 or $17 million. It's brought about almost $1 billion of revenue from the federal revenue into Alaska at a time that $1 billion really means something. So that's certainly been significant. And also the fiscal compromise that was accomplished last session. That was the vote was very bipartisan, almost equally House majority, House minority, and I don't think that would have happened without a unity administration. And that's a significant step in fixing Alaska, of getting the fiscal challenge that we've had, the fiscal certainty. Some companies talk about fiscal certainty, and I think Alaska needs fiscal certainty.
Well, it sounds like, according to some of the fiscal experts, that we're not out of the woods yet.
We are not out of the woods, but the remaining 20% could be closed with the price of oil rising. We've seen that rise. It certainly has come up from $26 a barrel, which what it fell to. So that certainly could take care of that. If that does close that gap, it'll be the first time we've had a balanced budget since probably 2011, 2012. And so it's a significant accomplishment.
A lot of people would say that it came at too high of a price tag to tap into permanent fund earnings. Would you reverse that decision in hindsight, given all the criticism that you've had about that, especially from people who say that they've basically been cheated out of income that would have come to them had the dividends not been reduced?
Let me explain how that works. It's a very difficult decision, the most difficult decision I've ever made. I come from a background of, I know what it feels like I can only imagine what it felt like when growing up in Delta Junction, what that additional money would have been in our family that were very, very financially strapped at that time. If we left the money we did not cap it. We left that money that was not paid out in the fund to grow the fund. We knew that we needed to grow that fund, and that's where it stayed. And it did grow the fund. And we've seen the dividend this year is $1,600. Not that many years ago was $800. So it's going in the right direction. Our concern is if we didn't make some change in the structure on that distribution, is that we're going to overdraw, and the dividend program would not survive very many years. We wanted to survive for generations and generations, and not just a few high years.
Well, at the time, I think you said something along the lines of that you had to be the adult in the room and take the first step. But do you think that you would still do that, given all the criticism you've had, would you do that again?
You know, my focus, Ron, has been on fixing Alaska. And I said, when I said in my State of the State, I told the legislature, I said, you know, I'll take the blame, you take the credit, let's fix Alaska. Let's fix Alaska for generations. So another State of the State, I said, you know, I ran for this job to do the job, not to make decisions to keep the job. So I'm not a very good politician as far as making decisions that are good for me. Every decision is what's best for Alaska. So I certainly have felt the brunt of the decisions I've made, and I understand that. I don't no disrespect for anybody that's upset at all. I didn't like doing it. I didn't. It was painful for me to do it, and but it's a decision that Governor Hammond talked about for some time. That at some point we'll have to make this turn, this fiscal turn. We were making more revenue off of our revenue than we were off of our resources. So we had to look differently at the revenue. That was the biggest source, our permanent fund, the biggest source of revenue, and we knew that change had to take place.
So if you do get a second term, what would be your top 3 priorities?
Well, certainly several. One is to, obviously on the crime issue is very, very important that we, you know, the plan we have in place is, you know, Attorney General Jonna Lindemuth, the 67-point plan that she has put in place, we definitely want to see that continued on. Very pleased with the Alaska Education Challenge that Commissioner Johnson has put in place with hundreds of Alaskans across the state, put that in place as far as how to increase our scores, but also not just increase scores, but make sure that those of our children in education, you know, have a career path associated with their time in education. And the third, I want Alaska to be at its full potential. That's one of the reasons I ran for governor, is that I felt our model was sort of to sit back, look at the phone, hope it rings, and hope it's somebody who's going to do something good in Alaska, and we'll live off what they do. We weren't acting like a sovereign. We were not on the world stage. We're not, you know, we're working at bringing direct flights from Asia to Alaska, which will triple or quadruple the amount of tourism in Alaska, and in the winter. They really want that in the winter. So you have to go out and proactively make some of these things happen. Resource development. You know, we have been a bystander in resource development. We incentivize, we give away hundreds of millions of dollars and hope somebody will do something. And that's just the wrong model. I think we need to have more of a CEO approach on our resource development, and that's what I brought to this position.
Well, we'll talk more about that and get into the gas line when we come back. Up next, we'll ask Governor Walker what his worries are about the future for Alaska and how he would navigate if reelected. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frontiers. The Walker administration was one of many firsts, from having a bipartisan ticket to a bipartisan administration in an era of extreme partisanship. It stood out. Well, it's been a grand experiment, and I want to talk a little bit about how well that's worked. You addressed that in the beginning of our program. You know, it seems like you wonder if this should be continued, because it seems like you got Democrats mad at you, Republicans mad at you, and it's hard to pull forward.
Well, at the end of the day, though, they work together. You know, our cabinet, look, I mean, I smile when I think about our makeup of our cabinet. We have people in our cabinet would never necessarily have any, you know, connection, but the fact that they're in the same administration. I use a couple. We have certainly, you know, Sheldon Fisher as our you know, Commissioner of Revenue, and Val Davidson as our Commissioner of Health and Social Services. You know, those are, you know, certainly Sheldon is a Republican and Val is a Democrat, and so we have them working together. And I think the product has been much better for Alaska as a result of having sort of the balanced approach and not the traditional. You know, we have escaped the Washington bipartisan battles in Alaska, and, you know, being the only independent governor in the nation, I can walk into any meeting and anywhere in the White House or in the administration, and I'm not a threat to them, that I'm not part of their party. I'm just.
But it may cost you your election, because you've got, you know, Mark Begich jumping into the race, and then you also have Mike Dunleavy, who has a solid chunk of very conservative voters that don't want to have anything to do with this bipartisan government.
Well, you know, Alaska is largely independent. In fact, I think we have the highest percentage in the nation. You know, we have, if you took all the registered Republicans and Democrats combined, still would be less than the number of independents that are out there. So I think Alaska has an opportunity to decide: are we going to put it in reverse and back into the sort of the cave we've been in of you know, partisan battling, or are we going to stay out in the daylight and be Alaskans and not have the influences or the tensions of partisanship? And so I think that's really the opportunity Alaska has, and I absolutely believe that so much more we can accomplish by working. You know, I get a kick out of how people, when they run for an office on a partisan ticket, they say how they're going to work across the aisle until the election. And then when after the election is over, they seem to sort of not do that anymore. And so, and for us, there are no aisles, there are no lines. We're partisan blind when it comes to that. We just are. So it's a difference.
I want to turn the focus to your opponents a little bit. What would you worry about with a Dunleavy administration?
Well, certainly I've seen him take steps to defund or take away funding for the natural gas pipeline to monetize our gas on the North Slope. So that concerns me. The largest single opportunity Alaska has for economic development. Second is his commitment to take away health care for 44,000 Alaskans. He said that a number of times publicly, and I think in publicized debates in this show, I think, or this station. And the third thing is when he talks about cutting the budget, we can cut the budget by another $1 billion. Where in the world is he going to do that? And so, you know, he says things that are just not will hurt Alaska. I think if you know, his administration will hurt Alaska. That's what concerns me. We made a lot of progress on helping Alaska, and so it concerns me he would hurt Alaska, and we've moved back into that mode of not just the very partisan battles, but we would move back into that role of sitting back waiting for something to happen. And
so if Mark Begich gets the job?
You know, I don't know that much about him because I'm not sure where he's been. I mean, he's been in Washington working for a lobbying firm since he lost his re-election for the U.S. Senate. He didn't contribute to the solution of what we had going on as far as solving these things. I don't really know what his plan is. I know when he came in, when he first filed, he said that he needed a while to sort of come up with his plan or vision because he had just filed, and most people have that before you file. So I think he's sort of catching up with and sort of piecing things together. But I worry about sort of the lack of a true vision for Alaska.
Well, he has laid out some specific plans, like for public safety.
He's put some website together, and that's certainly interesting. Many of them you know, overlap with what we have on our public safety action plan. I guess the difference is that we have a team in place. You know, I come from a building background. I've never excavated a hole in the ground and then said, now what am I gonna build? I have a plan in place. So we have, you know, when there was a problem on crime, as an example, we put together a team headed by the Attorney General and Commissioner of Public Safety, Commissioner of Corrections, and a number of other cabinet members. And they brought together the Public Safety Action Plan. And then they worked through that. And about 30 of it is done.
But regardless of what you've done, I mean, and whether or not it's had an impact or not, kind of the trend for crime is just growing in Alaska.
It is, but it's tied directly to the opioid drug crisis in Alaska. The University of Alaska recently put out an analysis showing that they're absolutely parallel. The spike in drug use and opioids is absolutely parallel to the spike in crime. There's little question. So what we've done is we have now intercepted about 1.5 million doses of drugs coming into Alaska. We have an unprecedented number of drug dogs that have intercepted drugs coming into Alaska. MOCA is featured on an ad in Seattle Airport saying, "Bring drugs to Alaska. We'll look forward to meeting you." So there are things that, as part of this plan, that are going forward. We added additional prosecutors. We've added additional money in the budget, and sometimes it comes down to a budget issue. You know, we've added money back in to give the Alaska State Troopers a well-deserved raise. So they were leaving, going to other agencies. So,
well, I do want to stop you there and talk about one thing that just really hits Alaska hard: this death of Ashley Johnson Barr, the 10-year-old girl who was apparently sexually assaulted and murdered. I know you were there for her memorial service. Do you think that Ashley's death is kind of a canary in the coal mine?
Well, I hope not, but I'm certainly looking at that as what can we learn from that to make sure that doesn't, cannot happen again. And I know that the time I spent there on Saturday, Senator Murkowski was there as well. We did a lot of listening. We did a lot of listening. Met with the families, and it was a lot of grief in that community, in that region, as a result of that loss. But what do we learn from that? What is the, in our social services network, how do we find, make sure that doesn't happen again? What do we learn from that?
Well, there seems to be something almost systemic, and what it will take to fix that is hard to say, but there's the case of Judge Michael Corey recently, who basically was not able to give a violent offender a strong enough sentence to keep him out of jail. He basically got a free pass, and a lot of people, are raising their eyebrows about this.
And rightfully so. When that law was passed in 2010, it didn't tie it to as a sex crime. And it was, if those that are tied to a sex crime have a certain level of sentencing that are different. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna make sure that cannot happen again. So sometimes these are found on a sentencing issue. That's when they're discovered. The key is that you fix them when they're there, but you also continue to look for, where else are there loopholes or that are not appropriately on the sentencing side.
Well, when you talk to rural Alaskans, they'll often tell you that they feel safety is one of their biggest problems, with high rates of sexual assaults, domestic violence. What do you see as a systemic solution? Because we don't have a lot of money. If you're looking at what your own budget experts are telling you, we may break even if we're lucky.
Yeah, well, and that's not acceptable. We need to be make sure that we are a safe Alaska. I mean, if you don't feel safe, that's just a basic need. We need to make sure Alaskans are feeling safe. We have done it on the rural safety side. Certainly, making sure that the troopers are not resigning, making sure that we have a full staff of troopers and village public safety officers as well. The 911 issue. This year we put money in the 911 issue that we didn't, we don't have a statewide 911. It's just in the urban areas you have that. In rural areas you dial an 800 number and you have a different 800 number for different regions. So if you're visiting your grandmother someplace, and we had this situation happen, grandmother had a heart attack and said call somebody, and she could only remember the 800 number from her area of Alaska. You gotta, if you can't even do that, make the basic of making a call, we have to be able to show up, and we're having a hard time being able to get some of the rural areas. So.
Well, that's an interesting example. And when we come back, I'd like to kind of maybe not focus so much on problems, but possibilities. So coming up, we'll talk with the governor about his hopes and dreams for Alaska's future, and some final thoughts on what he sees as his path to victory. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frontiers, and we are back with Governor Bill Walker with a look at what's at stake for Alaskans this election. Well, that old Crosby, Stills, and Nash song about knowing people by their dreams. You'll know them by their dreams. So we want to know you by your dreams for Alaska.
Well, I want to see an Alaska that has the lowest cost energy in the nation, not the highest. And especially in rural Alaska, my goodness, I was in Noatak over the weekend. It was it's amazing what we don't do with our energy in Alaska. I want to bring down that cost of energy, and that's what will happen when we finally are monetizing that natural gas. I want to have an Alaska that we aren't giving out pink slips every year to our teachers, our educators, going forward, that we have forward-funded budgets that we can look out in the future with certainty and not worry about, the price of oil today, and we don't make decisions about quality of life in Alaska based upon what the price of oil is. I'm very excited about that opportunity. An educational system where someone can come out of educational system that they can go right into a trade, work on the North Slope, commute back to their community, or go on to college, but have those career opportunities, career and technical opportunities under their belt, regardless of what you do. Every Alaskan should be able to, run a piece of equipment, build a house, do a little bit of plumbing, do enough electrical, do enough, have those basic skills in Alaska. So I think that's sometimes what's been missing our education. So, and also a place that our young people will not only stay, but if they leave, that they come back and be part of our for their careers as part of our growing Alaska, and not just a stagnant Alaska.
Ballot Measure 1, you've said you don't support it, but that to me seems to be a piece of the future. You know, this constant battle in Alaska between do we develop, do we preserve our environment, that juggling act.
And I think we can have both. You know, my concern is I think we have ballot measure 1 because we sort of took away the input of local stakeholders. Back when we used to have coastal zone management, used to be involved.
Would you replace that, return
I would,
to
with
that?
the concept, absolutely. With a concept that allows local stakeholders to have a say early on. I'm aware of no project they stopped, but when we took that away from them, I think this is the answer. This is what happens when you do that. So I'm very protective of fish. I'm the first governor that's come out and against the Pebble Mine. And I've been very, very strong about my concern about the Pebble Mine. But at the same time, we are a state, we need an economy to provide for the public safety, for the education, those kinds. So there has to be a balance. And I think the ballot measure 1, I think, goes too far. I'm a strong supporter of fish.
A lot of people have said that it's mathematically impossible for either you or Mark Begich to win against Mike Dunleavy because the two of you and Mark Begich, split the same pool of moderate voters, independent voters, and rural voters, native voters.
When I ran as independent, I heard the same thing as far as it was being mathematically impossible for me to win the first time. So what I do is this. Certainly it does complicate. I've had a number of lifelong Democrats come to me and say how frustrated they are that Mark is in the race. They certainly have said to me they feel that a vote for Mark Begich is a vote for Mike Dunleavy.
Well, let's say the polls come out and he's ahead. Would you consider dropping out so that one of you could win?
You know, the ultimate poll is going to be taken on November 6th, and I have a team in place addressing all the issues that are necessary to fix Alaska, to sort of, you know, to stop all that and say let's push the reset button and start over again. I can't do that to Alaska. You know, this isn't about me. I'm not a pedigreed politician. I'm not trying to run for another position someplace else or try to better my position. I'm not doing that. You know, Lieutenant Governor Byron Malott and I, both born in the territory, we're going to spend every day doing what's best for Alaska. And we've proven that we'll do stuff against our own best interests. And I don't see a lot of political courage out there that are willing to do that.
So I have to ask all of the candidates this is, let's suppose that you don't win, things don't go your way. What will you do afterwards? Will you still be involved?
You know, I will always be involved with Alaska. I was involved long before I decided to run for office. So I got involved back in the mid-'70s, and I've been involved ever since. And I didn't have to be in elected office to do that. You know, the advantage I think that a governor has, and what I have certainly seen, is that there are things that a governor can do on an international scene, sitting down with the President Moon of Korea, sitting down with the President of the United States, the President of China, the President of Tokyo Gas. You can have those opportunities as a governor that you can't otherwise. And what caused me to run is we just weren't taking advantage of those opportunities. We were sitting back in a partisan battle, and I think that was not healthy.
All righty. Well, one final question, quick one for you, is when you were running, you told me that you wanted to be remembered as Bill the Builder. How do you, I mean, if there's a little tag attached to your name, what would that be? Well,
I'm still Bill the Builder, but you have to balance a checkbook before you build. And so what we have done is we balance a checkbook. Now it's time to build Alaska, put Alaskans to work. You know, I get excited about creating something with, 20,000 construction jobs, earning $20,000 to $30,000 a month during those construction period on the gas line, low-cost energy. It will change Alaska like significantly greater than the oil pipeline change.
Well, Governor, we are out of time. I apologize for having to cut you off, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rhonda.
I appreciated you being here. Well, 2018 is an important political crossroads for Alaska, and in the governor's race, basically we have 3 roads coming together in November, and we hope that you will get out on November 6th and help us decide what road that will be. Thanks for joining us.